Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this 8th episode of the Open Research webinar. My name is Marco Jan, and I work for the Eclipse Foundation. And together with Pierre-Yves Gibello from the OW2 Foundation, we are your hosts today. So for those of you that don't know us yet, both Eclipse and OW2 are European open source foundations, and we actively participate in the European research framework initiatives and projects. So our philosophy is we strongly believe that research greatly benefits from open source and vice versa as well. Open source benefits a lot from research projects, right? So that idea is exactly why we're here today and why we created this open research webinar. That's to create a forum for researchers, but as well as industries to speak about interesting and promising open source projects, initiatives, open source results, and that mostly in the context of European research. So welcome everybody to this open research webinar. We already, as I mentioned, are in the 8th episode. So we had a couple of interesting presentations already over the last years. And well, if you're interested in any of those and trying to find out what we already did, have a look at the website. You can find most of the talks recorded on our website, opensourceinnovation.eu. Interesting topics from Industry 4.0 to cloud, to security and whatnot. So have a look at the website, and if you're interested, take a look at the recordings. Having that said, today on the agenda, we have two talks. The first one will be by Bruno Dillensäger, giving us a guided tour about performance testing with OW Cliff in the year 2023. And the second one will be by Giovanni Rimassa from Martel, presenting to us the European Cloud Edge and IoT community continuum. Sorry. Some housekeeping rules. As you notice, we are recording this meeting, so if you like to stay anonymous, leave off your video and leave your microphone muted. After each talk, we have 5 minutes of Q&A. If you'd like to ask a question, get in touch with the speaker. Either raise your virtual hand or add the question to the chat, or just raise your voice. So that's going to be interactive. A couple of announcements from Eclipse Foundation and OW2. If you're interested to learn more what we are doing and happen to be at Embedded World, we will have a booth there for Eclipse Foundation. You can, I think we will there with research, so you can learn a bit more about the research projects we are involved in, but also generally what the Eclipse Foundation is doing. And the second one is the EU Open Source Policy Summit 2023. Eclipse Foundation will be represented there in Brussels on February with a keynote and a panel on open source security, quite an interesting and hot topic currently. So if you're interested in that, feel free to participate. And with that, I would like to hand over to Pierre-Yves to tell you a bit about OW2 announcements.
Thank you very much, Marco. So on the OW2 side, first, we will be represented.
Sorry.
We will be represented at FOSDEM in Eclipse, at FOSDEM, sorry, with Eclipse Foundation as well, which Eclipse will have a booth, and we will be represented by one of our members, XWiki, on the XWiki booth. So some of us will also be present at least the first day of the event, so you can meet us there as well. Also, we have a very important information for our community, which is OW2Con 23, which is our annual event. It's in Paris. It's physical this year, of course. It's in Paris, June 14 and 15. And the call for paper is open, so feel free to to submit a talk. You are welcome to do that. The main theme this year is digital commons sovereignty. So it's around the impact of open source on the global society. And then also we will have a presence at Open Expo Europe in Spain. So it's in May in Madrid. To present our community. We are not so well known in Spain, so it's a bit new for us. And if some people from our community wish to join, it's possible. I have a talk, but we also can have a booth, so it's a possibility also to join us. Thank you, Marco.
Great, thank you. And so you can continue with introducing our first speaker.
Yes, of course, because Bruno, welcome Bruno, has been acting as an OW2 contributor for a very, very long time. He's leading the CLIF open source project since 2002. And in 2002, OW2 was not even yet called OW2. It already existed, but it was the ancestor of OW2, and Bruno was already among us. He works at Orange. On some IoT-oriented technologies, and he's both a computing scientist and an engineer. So he publishes scientific papers, and he also develops, industry-grade source code. So he has a quite strong and a quite stable, open source project, which is called CLIF. So CLIF is a framework for performance testing and monitoring, and you will discover what CLIF can do and what Bruno and his team can bring.
Thank you, Pierre-Yves. Let's start now. So yes, let's go directly. So yes, next. Okay, so what is CLIF? CLIF is OW2's performance and load testing tool suite. So let's have a look at the little picture on the right to explain what it deals with. So with CLIF, you deploy some load injectors on some probes through a network, over a network, to test the system under test. So for that, you have some load injectors that will send requests and wait for the responses and measure response times. And possibly the load injectors will also check the responses validity. And the probes will provide some measurements of resources usage from the system under test, which is important, but you may also put them at the load injector side to check that your load injection is behaving correctly. So there are a number of other tools like this one, but what is outstanding about CLIF is that it supports large-scale distributed load injection. So we are dealing here with, let's say, about 1,000 load injectors in parallel, which has been achieved already. And you, for each load injector, you may set an arbitrary number of virtual users. Can be 10, 1, 100, 1 million, or whatever. It all depends on what are their activities. With CLIF, you don't have to learn to master a programming language. You're using a high-level description of virtual users' behavior. The basic format is the XML, and now there is also a YAML transcription. You can inject load with a variety of protocols, and you can also monitor a variety of probes. And you can extend this in Java by defining your own plugins to support new network protocols, or dataset provisioning, or also your probes for your custom resources. And finally, what can be said also, and this is not typical to CLIF, but let's mention it. Once you have analyzed and say, coded, defined your application or your service call flows for load testing scenarios, you can reuse these scenarios just for integration tests or for live monitoring of your service. Next, please. Thank you. So when it comes to open research, it's remarkable that CLIF grew through years of open research. CLIF started from a collaboration from on performance benchmarking between Orange, which whose name was France Telecom at these times, and INRIA. And so it was in the Object Web community, the ancestor of OW2, 20 years ago. And since then, CLIF was always involved and associated to research topics from Orange internal research, but also from French collaborative projects. There are a number of PhDs that were done among these research subjects. Let's mention first the component-based software engineering research with the use and contributions to the Object Web fractal component model. And CLIF is built according to this model. Then we associated some research about autonomic computing with where we could implement some self-driven load testing campaigns and automated performance optimization campaigns. So by integrating capabilities of self-representation, self-configuration, and also with control loops. And also, we were involved in some cloud computing research projects where we implemented some performance testing in continuous integration with fully automated deployment, which means that you deploy in continuous integration both the system under test and also the load injection system, so CLIF. And this was performed in a multi-cloud test environment. Next, please, Pierre-Yves. Okay. So now let me give you some details about the toolbox, because there are a number of distributions and tools delivered by the CLIF project. So the first one, the basic one, is the CLIF server distribution. And all these tools are part of what we call the legacy CLIF toolbox. We'll see that there are new versions of CLIF now. So the CLIF server is the core runtime, providing a command line interface, and which makes it possible to deploy and execute distributed CLIF test plans by deploying and controlling the activity of load injectors on probes over a network. And basically, a CLIF server comes with a Java library and some companion scripts for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. Derived from this CLIF server distribution, we'll find other modules or distributions like the CLIF Swing GUI, which is the same, which is a CLIF server basically enhanced with Java GUI, Java Swing GUI for test execution and test results analysis. Then you have the CLIF Self-Bench, which is a CLIF server enhanced with research results about self-regulated load injection and autonomous benchmarking features. And so also you will find from Docker Hub, you will find a CLIF server container. Let's finish with the CLIF Eclipse console, which is the most advanced tool provided by the CLIF project. So it's a full-fledged CLIF graphical user interface, included advanced scenario edition and support for extending CLIF based on the Java development environment provided by Eclipse. And so this is delivered as an Eclipse rich client platform runtime. Next. Then more recently, a proactive version of Cliff has been developed. So I don't know if you know the proactive project from W2. For what you must understand for the Cliff requirements and needs is that it provides a distributed execution middleware with advanced network features, and which makes it possible to test, to make tests in very complex network topologies, and to provide also some other advanced features, but I won't detail them here. So this was born from a collaboration with Activeon, a company which is behind the proactive middleware. So this is also delivered as a Java library and companion scripts for Windows, macOS, and Linux. And on top of this Cliff proactive distribution, we are currently building the Cliff web user interface, so which is a web user interface providing not only test execution and control, but also and deployment, of course, but also online scenario and test plan edition with very convenient wizards and the peculiarity of providing a YAML view, which is new. This is a new feature that is provided here. Okay, because let's say Cliff is quite a mature project, and so XML was very fashionable at some times, but today YAML is more fashionable. Okay, so I wanted to give a demonstration of this, but since I can't share my screen, unfortunately, it won't be possible. But I'll try to do some workshop. I try to organize this with a W2 at next OW2Con. So next slide. Okay, so there are other tools and utilities that are compatible with both versions of Cliff, the legacy and the proactive one. First of all, let me mention the Cliff plugin for Jenkins, which provides automation for performance test runs, performance reporting, and performance trends reporting. And you can easily implement some alerting based on test results. We also provide an integration to RoboFramework tool. This enables for integrating Cliff tests to a RoboFramework test suite, and it provides a test validation based on performance metrics. If you are interested in easily and deploying an installation of Cliff over a network of nodes, we provide an Ansible role for that. And finally, we also have a repository that contains some bash script utilities. For example, to start and stop all the local or remote Cliff servers that are necessary to deploy and run a test plan. Also, some scripts that make it possible to make some alerting based on the test result analysis in terms of response times or occurrence of errors or of alarms. And also we have some utilities to generate some test plans and scenarios easily. For example, to change the load profile of an existing scenario. Okay, next one. So we'll skip it. If you want to have a look, there was a first demonstration during the OW conference, I think last year. So you can watch the video.
And you can also join us in Paris, June 14 and 15.
Yes, in June. Yes, we'll try to arrange a workshop on Cliff if possible. So next slide for conclusion. So Cliff is really so a result of open research, as I said, and it's really open source with LGPL v2 or v3 license. There is no freemium model, no paying license, no paying documentation, and every bit of Cliff is both free and free, if you see what I mean. Contributors are welcome. The community is really small these times, but if you are interested in this subject, and if you have some Java Spring Boot skills, you may contribute to Cliff Web UI, and we also have some upgrades to do to update the Eclipse console, which is currently based on a very old version. If you have any question, you can contact me directly or ask the Cliff mailing list. And so you have all the links about the project and the GitLab repository. Thank you. So now I may answer some questions if there is still some time.
Me, I have one question. How can I embed Cliff in my continuous integration pipeline? For example, is there a Maven plugin or something to do that?
Yes, I think there is a Maven plugin. There is a Maven plugin. I've not used it for a long time. There is one. Otherwise, you can just use the command line interface. This is what we do today. And of course, if you are using Jenkins, you can use the plugin. The benefit of using the plugin is not in terms of running the tests. It's just a matter of getting automatic reports and graphical reports.
Okay, there is no more question from the audience.
Can I ask one question, Giovanni here?
Yeah.
Can you quickly explain something about the language that you use to define the user behavior, which I think it's interesting bit of a load generator? What do you? I mean, I don't want the grammar of the language, understand? Just the capabilities. How do you model the users?
It would be very easier if I could share something, but
yeah, I'm sure.
So the thing is just so the definition of a behavior is defined by an external module which is called Isaac. So Isaac is a scenario architecture for Cliff. It's an extension. It's not mandatory, but it's typically used with Cliff. And so the basic language is XML, but so there is also an equivalent in YAML. You declare in this definition file, first you say that you want to import some plugins, and these plugins will add some capabilities in terms of network protocols. For example, if there is an HTTP injector, if you want to inject some load over a web API or website. But there are a great number of plugins. There are plugins to import some data sets, some specific conditions. Okay, so first you import plugins, then you define a set of behaviors. So behavior is the skeleton of what a virtual user will do. A virtual user will do some request over a system under test. You will also execute some what we call controls, which is just a change of configuration. For example, if you want to change the timeout, the connection timeout of the HTTP injector, you will use a control to change the timeout. You will have also some think time, what we call the timers, just to to make some pacing in your request. You will get also some data from data provisioning, data providing plugins. Okay, so, and there are also some conditions, and there are four statements. One is the if then else, and the conditions will be implemented by some plugin that you have imported. There is also a while loop. There is also a preemption block, so which is a little bit different from the while loop because there is no iteration. There is just a single iteration, and it can. The fact is, it can be interrupted. The block, if the preemption condition becomes false. And there is also a probabilistic branching feature. Okay, and so this will give the logical skeleton of your virtual user. And okay, so you have put all the requests and so on. And finally, you define a load profile, and for each behavior you have defined, you will set the number of virtual users that you want to be active according to time. Okay, and this you can deploy on several nodes in several load injection nodes, several Cliff servers, and then you will add all the traffic generated by all these scenarios.
Nice, thank you. I guess you can also do multiple populations, right? If you want to imagine that the mobile user will have a different profile, and yeah, that's very good. I think. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nice. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any more questions? So thank you very much, Bruno.
Thank you all.
Okay. Then welcome our second speaker, Giovanni Rimassa from Martel. Giovanni is Chief Innovation Officer at Martel, where he is responsible for business development, market positioning, and commercialization activities. And he leads the initiatives around artificial intelligence and computing continuum. Giovanni holds a PhD in information engineering from the University of Parma and is involved in open source for more than 20 years in both academia and industry. And today, Giovanni will explain us a bit about the European Cloud Edge and IoT continuum. So Giovanni, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So welcome everyone, and my talk is certainly about research, it's about open research, but is not directly presenting results of research projects, but is more about the coordination, community actions that are part of the European Commission funded research programs. In particular, I mean, let's say mini technical introduction is just that cloud computing and IoT have been coming closer and closer in terms of technology, protocol, application domains, so much so that now it is commonly talked about the fact that edge computing brought together cloud and IoT systems. And so we say there is no difference really between these segments anymore. It's all a continuum that, depending on the application and the setup, can cover everything from very smart but small sensors all the way up to data centers. So this is very well understood by the European Commission. It is an important topic of research in various programs, among which at the moment chiefly is Horizon Europe, that I suppose most of you know is an applied research program that brings together academic industrial partners that have to form consortia and bid for research for funding on topics that the Commission proposes because they are strategically important for the Europe development. Now, This is the initiative that I am presenting you today, which is called EU Cloud Edge IoT, and there is websites, social media. At the end, I will show you the explicit links. What is important is that, as I said before, this is not a research project per se, but is a so-called coordination and support action that tries to interact with research projects to help them talk to each other, to help their results being understood and advertised already while the projects are running, and so that you don't have to wait 2 or 3 years to read the publication and understand what the projects were up to throughout all this time. And I call this initiative instead of project because technically it's actually 2 projects. As you can see here, there is these 2 projects, Unlock CI and Open Continuum. I personally, with my company Martel Innovate, and also the Eclipse Foundation, you can see on the right, we are partners of the Open Continuum project, but we are working together with our colleagues of the Unlock CI project. The, let's say, role play between these 2 projects is that Open Continuum is more about infrastructure, concepts, architecture, and obviously you can imagine open source, given the partners, in an horizontal, let's say, approach, right? Whereas on the other side, you can recognize some partners like IDC, that is a large market analysis firm. So Unlock CI is going more vertical, if you want, and so they will study the impact of edge computing and computing continuum in strategic industries like manufacturing, automotive, agriculture, and so on. So there is the setup. As you see, the 2 projects started last year. Now we are working together. If you go on the website, you will find initial homepage that has sections like you can see here, where we try to give some entry points, both from a technological point of view, so what is cloud edge IoT and how these can be initially understood. And then, as I mentioned, there is also a verticalized aspect where we try to bring together, let's say, sub-communities that are already focusing on strategic industries and value chains that are important for Europe, like mobility, smart cities, energy, and agriculture, and others that I mentioned, manufacturing, healthcare, that I said before. Now, open source and open standards are absolutely central to this initiative, and they are also particularly central to the specific project that Martel and Eclipse Foundation belong to. So in Open Continuum, we really try to claim to start from the understanding that both open source and open standards, in different ways but sometimes complementary, they are important tools to make this transition effective, especially for Europe. I am very happy to have heard that the next yearly OW2 conference is about digital sovereignty, because digital sovereignty, or digital autonomy also sometimes, is the concept that the European Commission is using to exactly set up the goal that Europe wants to be able to run our own software and even hardware stack without being protectionist. So we will welcome the other extra European players, but we know that if it's necessary, Europe can stand on its own. And to achieve this demanding objective, open source is basically recognized as a very important enabler. Also, the other thing that I really appreciated from the introduction is these things that gone are the days where open source was about copying main industrial products in an accessible way, just to make them equivalent but more free from a, let's say, ideological point of view. Now open source is also actually breaking new grounds and being at the forefront of research. So for all these reasons, as I was saying, this initiative tries to build an open ecosystem, which means that we need to work with many other actors to set up a strategy for the digital autonomy in Europe, as I mentioned before, that can use open source standardization and also association and alliances as enablers. We want to also gather from the projects, from the research projects that we interact with, recommendations that can help other researchers, they can help industry, and can also help policymakers. The community that we are going to foster is not to be created from scratch, because this fact that the continuum is not a new phenomenon, but it is a converging of pre-existing technological segments like IoT, cloud, and edge computing, means that there are already these communities. So this becomes more, let's say, a work of engagement, also a little bit of arbitration. So we have to also show that there is no preference towards cloud systems, or there is no preference towards highly distributed, strong, locally deployed systems. It really depends on the use case, it depends on the setup. And so we want the community to merge, to integrate together, so that then you can choose the best combination of what every research or industry group has to offer. Now, I was saying there are these research projects, and so just to give you an idea of the size, but also of the potential of the community, I have this kind of Gantt chart of European Commission, Horizon Europe calls. And what is important here is that every block is a topic, so it is a certain area to investigate in research with a certain number of millions of euros attached to it. And then projects have to bid, so the consortia have to bid to be selected as the best option to work on that topic. So this means that every little block here is a topic that funds 5 to 10 projects, it depends. Each project typically has a budget of a few million euros, 5 to 10, and it has something between 10 and 20 partners. So you can see that only these little 4 that are the newest ones, there are already 80, potentially 80 institutions. So this block here is what I was talking about. So this data 0107 is the call where the 2 projects have been selected, Open Continuum and LogCI. It's us. They told us you have to work together and join forces to do the initiative. So that's clear. Then there are these other projects. These are projects that start in September. They will last mostly 3 years. And their goal was to start creating what the call calls Meta OS, but this means basically a distributed infrastructure that can cover cloud, edge, IoT. There are 6 of these. They have now 4 months in out of 3 years, so they are still at the beginning, but you will see later in the slides, we started already to get some discussion with them. Then there are newer calls. This one called Cognitive Cloud started, the projects are starting now. Actually, tomorrow I am in a kickoff meeting of one of these research projects where Martel is a partner. And there are 9 of those. And the goal here is to use artificial intelligence to make the cloud systems more self-managing, easier to automate, easier to cope with unforeseen accidents and so on. Now notice that in principle, this call wouldn't have anything to do with edge and IoT. It was about cloud and AI. But most projects, they know how important edge computing is. So also in this project, most everyone is also doing edge computing. So they also belong to the computing continuum. And the last ones are those. Swarm computing is about very highly distributed, little and let's say lower power nodes, like, I don't know, collaborative robots or different other cases. These are also starting now in January. There are 5 of those. So you see that we are already piling up some numbers here, but there are also the older projects, because in 2021, the Horizon Europe started, but there were projects from the previous program, Horizon 2020, that are still running. And there are some here in cloud computing. They will still run until the end of this year. Then there are others about the software technology, software engineering in distributed systems. And then there are even others about IoT. Actually, when I saw at the beginning the list of the talks of this series, there were a couple of projects like Morphemic and SmartCloud that belong exactly to this earlier wave. This is very important for us, for the initiative, because from a community point of view, we don't want the expertise of the previous project to be lost. So we don't want that all these projects that start now, they don't know anything from the project that have been working 2.5 years. So we are now trying to engage and to work together. And how do we do that? There are several ways, but one thing that we are organizing now, and we already have done some work, but is still to be fully launched, is a set of thematic task forces. So we defined 6 in agreement between the 2 projects and the European Commission. Strategic liaison is about talking and engaging with not single projects or single partners or single institutions, but with large initiatives. Things like Association for IoT or Big Data or Gaia-X for Cloud Computing Federation and so on. So this will be really a high level, let's say, discussion between large groups of European actors. Open source engagement, I don't have to explain, but I also have a later slide on that because it's more topical here. Architecture, same thing, is about, these 2 are the topics that I want to quickly mention here. Ecosystem engagement is like strategic liaisons, but at the level of commercial actors, segments, markets, and value chains. Market and sector is about the study of the verticals that I said before. And of course, communication is what I'm also doing here now, right? So it's all the activities to explain what we are doing, help the various projects, to communicate with each other, to maybe help each other, also to communicate with the outside world, to tell about what they're doing, about why it's important, and what are the results that they are achieving. Now, I'm not going to the details here, but of course, it's like a mini standard, not this mini working group, these task forces. So we have a series of rules, and each task force will have some plans, and we will interact both with the European Commission and also with the research projects and even external experts, because we haven't done it yet, but we will also issue some call for advisory and participation from experts in these various fields. And they will publish or organize events, publish white papers that will be part of the discourse about computing continuum in Europe. So I was saying that the 2 that I wanted to mention in more detail are open source engagement and architecture for obvious reason. So the open source task force, one important, and this is led by the Eclipse Foundation, partner of Open Continuum, as I said, is an important goal of this is to help the research project with having their own open source strategy. So in a forum like here, I think everybody knows that it's not enough to have an open source license and to make the code available into some known repository to really have an open source strategy. You have to talk about governance. You have to talk about how you accept external contribution, how do you organize the work, how people that want to help can be instructed, can be inserted in the organization, and so on. Most research projects, they don't have experts in that. So it will be our job to help them and give them some pointers to Eclipse or W2 and other foundations, then will be their choice, that can provide this kind of support and also a home, right, for the open source projects that the project produce, or even better, that they want to join. Because most often this research project, they create their own thing from scratch, and then they have the problem of bootstrapping a community. Sometimes it's better for them to try to join an existing open source community and engage them and then contribute to that. Very good. Then the other one is architecture. Now, this is not only about technical software architecture, as in which protocols, which components, which topology we use for computing continuum system, but also about taxonomy definition. Because as I said, this community is actually the effort to merge different existing communities. And these communities, they don't speak the same language exactly. Especially there are very controversial words, the most obvious, which is edge. So if you ask what is edge computing to someone that comes from the cloud system and data centers, they will have a certain idea. If you ask to a telecommunication operator, they will have another idea. And if you ask a IoT sensor producer that is building a platform bottom up, they will have another idea. So at the moment in the architecture task force, we are also talking about glossary, terminology, and so on. Again, not from scratch, because there are associations that have published these taxonomies, and so we are working with them. And later also we will have also the proper architectural task to define what are the important blocks for computing continuum systems, what are the alternatives, the structures, the patterns that can be documented and reused by engineers. On this specific topic, I just wanted to mention an event that occurred earlier this week and managed by the Eclipse Foundation in the context of the Open Source Task Force, where, if you remember, when I made all the classification of the projects, there were the 6 MetaOS projects that are the ones that started in September, have already 4 months of work. So we started to engage them. So there was a workshop with the representative of this project, where they explained to the others how they are defining their architecture, what open source components they think they will use. And then there was a discussion, and there was an interactive tableau where we will then try to synthesize the first ideas from this project into some initial architecture. So you see that it's an interplay between engaging, getting technical contribution, and giving also some, let's say, connection between what the European Commission set as a dynamic objectives, because they write the calls, people win the calls, but then they change as to what the Commission wants. So the CSA tries to a little bit act as a dynamic helper for these things. And this concludes my presentation. I leave you with the logo and the contact points that you can reach us on the web, of course, but also through Twitter, LinkedIn.
Thank you very much for this presentation. Very interesting. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, we have a question in the chat, actually.
Okay, there we go. The question to Giovanni is, what is the main objective of the EC regarding open source and open source communities?
Well, okay, first of all, I cannot speak for the EC, right? So just take what I say as an educated guess from someone that interacts with some units of the EC. It is clear that in the DG Connect, so in the directorate that is really about digital and networking and computing systems, they recognize that open source is basically, it's an unavoidable enabler. So it's not only that it's good, it's just that Europe just wouldn't stand a chance without embracing the open source strategy. So they are past the first let's say, hurdle. So it's clear that they see open source as a super important enabler. And now they are in the second step, that is, how can we really make sure that Europe is an important actor within open source? And so there is a very large report that was issued by the European Commission. I don't remember if it's from the JRC, the Joint Research Center, but I mean, I can then publish the link. And this is all about the impact of open source on the GDP, and also on how to distinguish between, using open source and being contributor, and being a project owner, and being in the project governance, and so on. In the initial slide that was given by Eclipse as a starting point here, you can see that Eclipse colleagues, they put the European flag on some of the projects because there is already acknowledgement of which projects are born and managed mostly in Europe. Of course, open source is a global phenomenon, and this is clear to the Commission. So I hope this helps give some frame. I think that what the Commission wants from open source, they want to see the contribution of European actors grow. And they also want to make sure that open source projects, they can grow and stay in Europe while reaching a global dimension. It's like now they fund the startups, But now they have the problem that when the startups are successful enough, they get bought out by non-European companies. And this is the corresponding pattern in open source is this. They know that good European research will generate initial incubator open source projects. But now they want this to grow and stay in Europe. That's why they are very interested in working with foundations like Eclipse or OW2, because they see that it's not just enough to sprout the project, but they really need the awareness and the community and also the power, if you want, that there is still an important European voice. Sorry, I couldn't hear.
No, I think it was background noise.
Okay. So I hope this.
Okay. Well, very good. Thanks a lot for this answer and this additional explanation, Giovanni.
Very good. So then I can stop sharing my screen, right?
Yes. Thanks again to our speakers, Bruno and Giovanni, and for everybody to listening and participating. That concludes this 8th episode of the Open Research webinar, and we are happy to already invite you, or at least save a date for April 25th. That's when the next episode will happen. Presentations, topics are not yet announced. If you subscribe to our newsletter, we will inform you, of course, timely. And we would appreciate if you would fill out the feedback survey, which you should receive via email afterwards. For that, thank you very much. Have a nice day and hopefully see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.